All right, so another very interesting week in the markets. Obviously, everybody's bummed out about Bitcoin. However, we did have a new intraday high within on the S&P. Stocks were basically everything was down ever so slightly on the week. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Bitcoin. First things first, as usual, if you get value out of the video, please like and subscribe. Uh, Check out the links below. So, getting right into it here. The first one I wanted to talk about from the Real Plan C at 108,000, Bitcoin is down 13% from its all-time high. During the 2017 bull run, Bitcoin frequently dropped around 30% from the highs before continuing upward. Currently, there's over 90% of Bitcoin models, indicators, and patterns suggest the cycle's not over, with new all-time highs likely in the coming 4 months. There's also strong reasons to believe the cycle could extend into next year. I would not be surprised if we see new all-time highs before the end of September. I don't know if it's going to be that early, but the one prediction I am very confident in making is that I don't believe we've seen the highs yet. I really don't. And the reason for that is number one, we're going into a Fed easing cycle, and number two, the one thing that does scare me with Bitcoin, honestly, is if we see a stock market correction, Bitcoin probably follows that. They probably follows that. So that's the thing that scares me the most. But the one thing that I think is or the many things that are good is we're going into an easing cycle, which means stocks probably aren't going to sell off, at least anything significantly. And the other thing is Bitcoin's fundamentals are better than ever. It really is better than ever. So I really don't know why we would see crazy amounts of weakness when the fundamentals are better than ever. We have treasury companies, sucking it up like vacuums, ETFs. The one big thing that's going on is it seems like a lot of whales are selling for whatever reason. I'm assuming it's just they've made a ton of money and then they want to cash out or take some profits, which I understand. But I mean, to me, selling your whole stack, I think is pretty stupid. But again, that's just me. But I think that that's why we're seeing the weakness. But again, like he points out here, we're down only 13%. This is not some crazy correction, right? I mean, 30, 40, 50% corrections during bull markets are not out of the ordinary. It really isn't. I think that this is just a classic bear trap, uh, and we're going to go higher before the end of the year. I still think we're going to hit 150, 200, maybe even more this cycle. Obviously, I could be completely wrong about that, but I still think we have not seen the highs at the very least in this cycle. Because what points to that? Like, what points to that? If someone would have told you a year or two ago that the treasury companies would be buying at the levels that they're buying, people would be head over heels. Like, I would have been so ecstatic, it's not even funny, even if you would have told me that. So I don't think we've seen the bottom. I think we're still a ways from it. Uh, the whales selling off so much Bitcoin, yeah, that's a little concerning, but that can only go on for so long, right? I mean, if you look at the Bitcoin, the long-term holding charts, it's always like three-quarters of coins are not moving, which means when people are buying Bitcoin, roughly three-quarters of that is going into cold storage and it ain't moving, at least not for a long time. So that's why I think we have not seen the top here, right? The thing that scares me the most is the stock market, right? It is the stock market because the stock market is overvalued right now. And we could easily see a 10, 15, 20% pullback. And that would probably spell, a 20, 30, 40% pullback for Bitcoin as well. And again, I think the point out here is 13% is child's play, like especially for Bitcoin. Even for the stock market, that happens like twice a year on average. For Bitcoin, that happens 5 times a year probably. So I really don't know why people are so bummed out. Like I really don't. So that's another thing that's a little bit concerning. But at the end of the day, there is no reason to be that bummed out. Strategies acquired 3,081 Bitcoin, 115,000 a coin. They now have 632,457 Bitcoin. Why is this important? This is important because Strategy now holds over 3% of the total Bitcoin that will ever exist. And when you account for lost coins, we're probably talking about 3.5 to 4%. And this is insane. And strategy's even has been even weaker than Bitcoin over the last month or two. But again, I think this is a temporary thing. There's no way this lasts forever. But again, you also have to keep in mind that back in April, strategy corrected down to like 250 a share, which again, that could happen again. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I think that again, strategy is a coiled spring. It's only a matter of time until we see five, 600, $700 a share. Only a matter of time until we see that. And that could happen. We could go from where they're at right now, like 335 roughly, to like if we were at $500 a share by the end of September, wouldn't surprise me even at all. Now again, if they're 250, it also wouldn't surprise me. So you have to keep that in mind, right? You have to keep that in mind that I think strategy really is a coiled spring. It could go up very, very quickly. If Bitcoin goes to 130, 140, 150, we could see five, $600 a share strategy. In fact, we probably will see that. So, former White House crypto director Bo Hines is confident Bitcoin Reserve Act will be signed into law this year. 2025 will be a historic year. I'm not overly confident. I mean, I like that, Trump and whatnot, they're talking in the right way, but as far as actual action, they haven't done that much. Like they're talking a really good game. I have to give them credit for that, but they haven't done that much. As far as I can tell, they haven't bought any new Bitcoin. They haven't came up with a plan to buy any new Bitcoin. But again, we are still, whatever, it'd be just over 7 months into the administration. So it's not like we're too late by any means, but they really need to get this done. And it needs to be something actually tangible, like simply just saying, hey, we're going to hodl existing coins, I think is stupid. I think a decent plan is you sell all the shit coins, you put that into Bitcoin mining and you say, hey, going forward, all of these coins that we mine, uh, we are going to hodl, right? That would be a half decent strategy. But again, they're not even doing that, right? They're not even doing that. So they're by far the best administration in history. But I mean, there's really only been four administrations ever since Bitcoin came out. So they definitely should be doing more. I hope they do more, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath. The next one from Documenting Sailor. By 2032, 97% of Bitcoin will be in existence. The last Bitcoin will take 34 years to mine. So, another thing to bring up too is that after the 2032 halving, it will be less than one Bitcoin, 0.78125 to be exact. Bitcoin will be the new block reward, right? So, I don't think people are taking this into account enough. Like this is so important, and the reason for that, or another reason for that, sorry, is that if we look at this, like I said, one Bitcoin in 2032, we go below one Bitcoin. So if you look at the block reward right now, it's 3.125 Bitcoin, which is about in US dollars, you're looking at about $350,000, give or take. Maybe it's actually a little less, 330,000, 340 roughly. If you go to uh, if you go to 2032, the block reward is four times smaller than that, right? So you can buy $340,000 worth of value in 2032 in today's dollars for about 85,000, right? Like people don't seem to be able to figure this out, right? As long as the demand for Bitcoin stays steady, you can get $340,000 roughly in value for $85,000 today, right? That's a very good return in a matter of 7 years. An even better way of looking at this is if we look at 2044, right? 2044 is going to be the first cycle where we go below zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, right? Zero point 0.1 Bitcoin is going to be right around just under $11,000 today in US dollars. Like I said, you can get you can pay $11,000 today to get $340,000 in a matter of 19 years, right? 19 years, you can turn $11,000 into 340,000, right? Or let's just say you times by 10, right? Let's make this sound really interesting, right? $110,000 and you get 3.4 million, right? Can you wait 19 years to turn $100,000 into over 3 million, right? That's pretty much my base case on this kind of stuff. A lot of people are even more bullish. Like if you think Bitcoin's going to be at 10 million a coin by 2044, like a lot of people say, which I think is certainly possible, wouldn't surprise me. But even if you want to take the base case of it's going to grow at the exact same rate that it's grown at, or it's going to be right around where it currently is. Right. So for all the people bummed out about, oh, it's only 108,000 a coin right now, if you look at it that way, even at 108,000 a coin, you're still looking really good. Let's say Bitcoin's worth 200,000 a coin, or let's say you think Bitcoin's way undervalued right now. You think it's worth 200,000 a coin. Well, that implies that by 2032, we're going to you're going to have you buy one Bitcoin right now, you're going to have $800,000. And by 2044, you're going to have, what would that be? 20 million, right? So people don't realize just how much more room we still have to run. So when you look at charts like this, like how can you not be more so optimistic? Like it really makes no sense to me. The last thing here, the core cognitive dissonance in the Bitcoin space today, individuals buying and holding Bitcoin equals adoption, corporations buying and holding Bitcoin is a bubble. This is something that I really agree with. And again, I'm not necessarily a fan of some of these companies doing it just for the hype, because I think some of them are doing that. But I do think the strategies of the world, the meta planets of the world, Semler Scientific, like I do think they're core believers in Bitcoin. And I don't know if I can really think of very many. I don't want to name any because that might ruffle some feathers, but I can't think of very many that are just in it for the hype and for the number go up, and or even worse reasons. Like I really can't think of very many. Right? You could argue the miners, but again, that's a different story. They're not necessarily treasury companies. So again, I think that this is going to be a thing of the future, right? And I think that some of the OG Bitcoiners, like the people that have been holding for 10 plus years, a lot of those people are people that kind of get off, for lack of a better word, of being so early and making so much money. And, you know, I'm not necessarily going to be envious of them because they made smart decisions. I'm not going to be envious, but I think that you have to look at it as if Bitcoin is as good as we see it is, then of course corporations are going to want to hold it. Like if Bitcoin truly is so much better than the dollar, like why would you expect them not to want to buy Bitcoin? Like it makes no sense. So you can't say in the same breath that it's bad that corporations are buying Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is also, going to destroy the dollar. Like you can't say those because either they're both true or they're not true, right? Either Bitcoin is, tulip mania, like Peter Schiff says, and it's bad the corporations are buying it, or it's good the or sorry, Bitcoin is the best money, the hardest asset we've ever seen on the planet, which I think it is, and it's only a matter of time for the corporations to buy it. So let's talk about stocks here because I haven't talked about stocks. Like I said, well, I briefly mentioned stocks. So basically, we've seen this week everything was basically flat to down slightly. Um, the S&P was down 10 basis points. The Nasdaq was down about 20 basis points. Small caps about the same. Mid caps a little bit more. So Like I said, we did see an intraday high on the S&P, but I do think that stocks are overstretched a little bit. But you also have to keep in mind that if we see two or three rate cuts over the next 10, over the next 6 months, and we don't see massive, we don't see any more upticks in inflation, the jobs numbers continue to be questionable. I would be surprised if we see a major correction in the stock market. Now, it is inevitable that we see corrections, right? It's inevitable. It's guaranteed to happen at some point. The problem is nobody knows when it's going to happen. And we very well could run up to 7,000, even 7,500 on the S&P. Then we pull back 10, 15, 20%, and we're right back at, 6,000, 6,500. And all the people that sold and went to cash while rates go down, which I think is a stupid decision. Um, again, if you're going into like corporate bonds or stuff like that, I think maybe you can get a half decent return. But if your plan right now is I'm going to sell and go to T-bills, I think that's a bad move. I think that's a bad move. Just my opinion. So even though I think that we're overdue for a stock market correction, it could be 6 months, it could be a year until we see it. Like nobody knows when it's going to happen, and we could go up another 10, 20% before that happens. So my strategy, as always, dollar cost average the indexes, change the amount you're doing up slightly, depending on what you think is overvalued, undervalued, but I'm still buying I'm still buying the Nasdaq every week. It's just not as much as I normally buy. Same goes for the S&P. I'm buying a little bit more international. I'm buying a little bit more value, small caps and mid caps. Now again, if we see a big correction, I'm immediately going to flip that and I'm going to start buying as much Nasdaq, as much S&P as I can. That's just my position. So let's get into earnings. The big one this week was Nvidia. Now, Nvidia actually released pretty solid earnings. They beat earnings, they beat revenue. However, the problem with companies like this is they're already they're already they're already pricing in a lot of growth, right? I mean, this is a company that trades at a 25 price to sales, a 48 PE. Like that is pricing in a lot of future growth. And when they have earnings reports that are good and not great, they sell off, right? They sell off. So that's what we've seen with Nvidia. It was a decent earnings report. However, when they're already trading at such a high valuation, you need blow it out of the water earnings reports, right? So the next one here is going to be BMO, Bank of Montreal. They released good earnings, they beat revenue, they were up quite nicely on the week. That's good news for Canada, although we're in some other troubles, and to say the very least. Royal Bank of Canada, also a similar story, released very good earnings. They were up quite significantly on the week. Agilent Technologies, this is one that I used to hold. I would buy it. I just want to get it a little bit better of a price. Um, Beat earnings and revenue, they were up quite nicely on the week. The next one is going to be CrowdStrike. They also beat earnings and revenue. They did lower guidance though, which is kind of surprising because they were basically flat on the week. It looks like they sold off immediately after releasing earnings and then they were bought right back up. So kind of an interesting story there. The next one is VEEV. Also beat earnings and revenue. They issued questionable guidance, which again, they sold off quite significantly on that news. This is the name that's also pretty expensive, so not a big surprise there. And the last one on the week is going to be TD Bank. Similar story to the other banks. They actually released pretty good earnings. They were actually looks like they were down on that news quite significantly, but they did manage to close the week up. They weren't quite as good as Royal Bank and BMO, but still solid earnings. So that is the earnings picture from this past week. That is the news from this past week. My predictions going forward, like I said, I still think Bitcoin has room to run. I still think, honestly, the stock market has room to run, especially assuming we're going to see these rate cuts. The market is pricing in, I think, about 1.5 to 2 cuts. We're at about a 90% chance we get a cut in September, so that would be something that certainly could spook the markets, even though we're at a 90% chance. If they decide, hey, we're not cutting, that could spook the markets. There's a lot of things that could spook the markets, especially given we're certainly a little bit overvalued. I don't think we're crazy overvalued like a lot of people are saying. I just don't. Um, but we are certainly overvalued, right? We are certainly overvalued, and that is a little bit of a cause of concern. But again, you never want to try and time the markets because over the short term, anything can happen. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, comment, check out those links below, and stay tuned for more.